I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who had to fear her own home. I worked my entire life to build a safe place for my children, sanctuary full of warmth, laughter, and the kind of stability I never had growing up. At 58 years old, I believed I had finally reached a stage in life where the worst battles were behind me. I had buried my husband 7 years earlier, grieved him deeply, and then found a rhythm again. Not the same as before, but steady enough to give me peace. My 3 children, 2 boys and a daughter, were grown now, but they still circled back to me often. Family dinners, birthdays, random drop-ins on Sunday afternoons. That was the rhythm I lived for. When you spend decades working as a teacher, like I did, you develop instincts for reading people. Subtle shifts in their tone, what they choose not to say. The way their eyes dart when you ask a question, those tiny tells that students never think you notice. That instinct had saved me more times than I can count, and it would become my lifeline when the storm hit. But at that time, I had no idea the storm was even forming. The trouble began with something as ordinary as needing help. My daughter, Emily, had just had her second baby, and she was exhausted. Her husband worked long hours, and although I was around to help, my own knees and back weren't what they used to be. I told myself I could do it all, that I could be the ever-available grandmother, the dependable retired teacher with unlimited patience. But the truth? My body betrayed me some days. Carrying groceries left me sore. Bending to pick up toys left me dizzy. Emily saw it too, and one afternoon as she sat rocking the baby in my living room, she said softly, "Mom, maybe it's time we think about extra help." Extra help. That's how it started. A phrase so simple, so practical. And so we began searching for a nanny. The woman who eventually walked into my home introduced herself as Victoria. She looked to be in her late 30s, tall with sharp, striking features that almost made her beauty intimidating. Her dark hair was pulled into a neat bun, her smile was soft, and her voice carried the kind of warmth that makes you lean in and trust. Emily's baby immediately reached for her, and I remember thinking, that's a good sign. Children sense things we adults overlook. Victoria had papers, glowing recommendations, neat records, a background check that showed nothing alarming. She told us she had worked with several families before, but had been looking for a new position after relocating to our city. She carried herself with confidence, the kind that reassures you she knows what she's doing. I was hesitant at first because handing over your family to a stranger feels like giving someone the keys to your soul. But my daughter was struggling and I was tired. So I agreed. For the first few weeks, everything seemed perfect. Victoria was punctual, attentive, and surprisingly skilled at managing 2 children at once. She cooked small meals, cleaned without being asked, and even offered to run errands. The kids loved her. Emily told me one evening, "Mom, I don't know how we lived without her." But my instincts, they nagged at me. It started with small things. One evening, I noticed Victoria had slipped into the den where my late husband's old filing cabinet sat. When I asked what she was doing, she smiled apologetically and said she was just looking for the bathroom. Maybe that was true. Maybe. But something about the ease with which she closed that cabinet made me uneasy another time. I walked in to find her on the phone. She was speaking quickly, quietly, and the moment she saw me, she hung up. When I asked who it was, she laughed and said, "Oh, just my sister." Yet her hands trembled slightly as she tucked the phone away. I wanted to dismiss these doubts. After all, we all have private moments, secrets we keep. Who was I to judge? But as the weeks went on, the unease grew. I began noticing patterns. She always asked particular questions, not just about Emily or the children, but about me, about finances, about the old house I still owned that I'd been renting out, about the savings my husband had left behind. They were questions disguised as casual conversation. But my teacher's ear caught the undercurrent. One night, after Emily and her husband had gone to bed, I stayed in the kitchen sipping tea. Victoria came in quietly, almost startled to see me still awake. She smiled, but her eyes flickered to the ledger I kept on the counter, my simple record of household expenses. I saw her glance linger too long, her smile stretched too wide. And in that instant, a shiver of recognition ran down my spine. I had seen that look before in students caught cheating, in colleagues who wanted what wasn't theirs. Still, I told myself I might be overreacting. Paranoia isn't pretty on a woman my age, and I was determined not to let suspicion consume me. But then came the night that changed everything. It was late. Maybe close to midnight when I woke to the sound of the back door creaking shut. At first I thought it was Emily's husband, but then I remembered they weren't even home that weekend. They had taken the kids to his parents' house. It was just me and Victoria in the house. My pulse quickened as I slipped out of bed and crept down the hall. I saw a sliver of light under the study door. Quietly, I pressed my ear against the wood. Her voice was hushed, but her words were like ice water down my back. Yes, she still has the deeds. The savings too. No, she doesn't suspect. I froze. My chest tightened. She wasn't talking to a sister. She wasn't talking about Emily. She was talking about me. I wanted to fling the door open. To demand answers. But decades of teaching teenagers had taught me the value of patience. I waited, listened, memorized. When she finally ended the call, I slipped back to bed, my mind racing by morning. She was back to her perfect, cheerful, self-cooking pancakes humming softly, carrying the baby with effortless grace. But now I knew. This wasn't a nanny. This was something else. Someone else. I didn't confront her right away. I decided to wait, to let her show me who she really was. And little by little, she did. She started leaving the house at odd hours, claiming she had errands. She asked for access to more family documents under the pretense of organizing things for Emily. She even suggested I put certain accounts in her name temporarily to help with bills. That was the moment I smiled, nodded, and knew I had to act. Because Victoria wasn't just a nanny. She was a serpent coiled quietly in my home, waiting for the right moment to strike. And she thought I was too old, too trusting, too naive to see it. But she had underestimated me. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from, because what happened next is something every woman needs to hear. I didn't sleep much after that night. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of light from the hallway made me jolt awake. My gut told me the woman I had let into our lives was planning something bigger than just snooping. The kind of planning that destroys families from the inside out. But outwardly, I acted as though nothing had changed. That was my advantage. She thought she was playing a clever game. She didn't realize I'd already joined it. The next morning, Emily dropped by with the kids. I made coffee while Victoria carried the baby around the kitchen, bouncing him softly against her shoulder as though she were his second mother. Emily smiled at her with such gratitude, and my heart twisted painfully. I wanted to blurt out everything I'd overheard, but Emily was so fragile. The new baby, the long nights, the anxiety of motherhood all over again. If I told her too soon, she'd think I was paranoid, even cruel. I had to collect proof first. Undeniable proof that would open her eyes. So I began watching Victoria more closely. I paid attention to every detail, every slip of her mask. I noticed how she always carried that little black notebook in her purse. Once when she left it on the counter, I thought about opening it, but my hands froze. If she walked in and caught me, she'd know the game was up. Instead, I memorized its worn cover, the bent corner. The faded initials embossed on the front. Days stretched into weeks, and she grew bolder. One evening, Emily's husband Mark came home late from work. I'd stopped by to drop off some groceries and overheard him thanking Victoria for handling things while Emily napped. His words were simple, harmless enough. But the way she looked at him, a smile that lingered just a second too long, made me tighten my grip on the grocery bag. I wasn't just worried about our money anymore. I was worried about my family's heart. A week later, we sat down to dinner, me, Emily, Mark, the children, and Victoria. She had prepared the meal herself, roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans dressed with almonds. Emily beamed at her as if she were some savior. "Mom, isn't this wonderful? She's not just a nanny, she's a chef, a housekeeper, a miracle worker." I forced a smile. "Yes, it's very nice. But inside, I felt my stomach knot. Not because of the food, but because I realized Victoria was weaving herself into our lives like ivy, slow, subtle, and suffocating midway through dinner. Victoria leaned in and asked Mark a question about his work. She listened with such intensity, nodding, asking about his hours, his income, his stress. She wasn't just making conversation. She was collecting information, cataloging it. I could see it in the sharpness of her gaze, the way she filed his words away as though they were clues to a puzzle only she knew how to solve. That night, after I went home, I sat in my quiet kitchen with the old wooden clock ticking on the wall. My husband's face flashed in my mind the way he used to warn me. Trust is earned slowly, but lost in an instant. He'd left me a modest but solid estate. This house, the rental property, some savings, and a few investments. Enough to keep me comfortable, enough to help Emily when she needed it. And now I realized that's what Victoria had sniffed out. She must have discovered somehow that I wasn't just another tired grandmother. I had resources. Resources she wanted. One afternoon, I tested her. I pretended to be struggling with the rental property accounts and mentioned casually that I was considering giving someone power of attorney to manage. Her eyes lit up. Just for a fraction of a second, her expression slipped a flash of greed, of calculation before she smoothed it over with her usual warm smile. "Oh, Mrs. Harris, you don't need to worry about all that stress," she said sweetly. "I could help you with those documents if you'd like. I have experience with this sort of thing." My skin prickled. There it was, clear as daylight. She wasn't after Emily's gratitude or Mark's admiration. She was after control. That night, I prayed for strength. I'm not ashamed to admit it. My knees hit the floor and I begged God to give me wisdom. I was 58 years old, tired, grieving still. But I wasn't about to let this serpent coil tighter around my family. And then, as if in answer, something happened that gave me the crack I needed. I had gone to Emily's house early one morning to drop off muffins. Victoria was there already, of course, dressed immaculately as always. But she was distracted, rushing out the door with her purse clutched close. She didn't notice the small folded piece of paper that slipped out and fell beneath the shoe rack. After she left, I bent down and picked it up. It wasn't much, just an address scrawled in her handwriting. But I knew the street. It was a part of town known for pawn shops and shady dealings. My instincts told me this wasn't innocent. I didn't tell Emily, not yet. Instead, I followed the thread quietly. I went down to that street myself a day later, walked past the address. It was a small office with darkened windows and a peeling sign that read Private Investigations. My pulse quickened. Why would a nanny be meeting with investigators? And then it hit me. Maybe she was digging into us. Into me, the realization made my blood run cold. The following days blurred together. I found myself second-guessing every word she spoke, every glance, every gesture. I stopped sleeping well. And then came the night I nearly collapsed. I had stayed at Emily's house late, helping with the children. Victoria had made tea, chamomile, she said, to calm my nerves. But halfway through drinking it, I felt my chest tighten, my head grow heavy. The room spun. Emily thought it was just exhaustion, maybe my blood pressure. But I knew better. I'd had chamomile my whole life. This wasn't normal. I excused myself, forced a smile, and went home. The moment I walked in my door, I poured the rest of that tea down the sink. The scent was bitter, too sharp, too off. Something had been slipped into it. I was sure of it. Lying in bed that night, trembling, I realized the danger was no longer abstract. It was real, immediate, breathing down my neck. And yet, I also felt something stir inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. The old steel of survival, the same grit that had carried me through widowhood, through raising children on a teacher's salary, through losing friends and gaining scars. Victoria thought she was circling her prey, but I was wide awake now, watching, waiting, ready. Because if she wanted a game, she had chosen the wrong opponent. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. The next part of this story will show you how a woman who was supposed to protect us nearly destroyed everything, and how I decided to turn her own tricks against her. The morning after that poisoned tea, I woke up with a pounding headache and a fire in my chest. My first thought was fear. My second was anger. I sat there at my kitchen table with a glass of water, staring out the window at the gray dawn, and I knew one thing for sure. I had let this go on long enough. Victoria had crossed a line. She wasn't just scheming. She was dangerous. And if I didn't stop her, she would sink her claws deeper into my family until there was nothing left. But the question was, how? I couldn't just tell Emily. She was too close, too blinded by gratitude. Mark might listen, but even then, what proof did I have? A bitter cup of tea and a scrap of paper with an address weren't enough to expose the serpent we'd invited into our home. If I accused her without evidence, I'd look paranoid. Worse, I'd push Emily further into her arms. No, I needed a plan, so I began documenting everything. I carried a little notebook in my purse and wrote down times, dates, odd behaviors. The way Victoria lingered near Mark. The moments she forgot important details about the children, only to swoop in later and save the day. The times she encouraged Emily to rest while she handled things slowly, making herself indispensable. But my instincts told me the real story. Was in that office she visited. That address? If she was tied to investigators, maybe I could find out why. I wasn't naive. I knew it was risky. But I also knew that if I didn't dig deeper, we'd never escape her. One Wednesday afternoon, when I knew Emily and the kids were out at a playgroup, I parked 2 blocks away and walked down that seedy little street again. My heart pounded as I approached the office. The blinds were drawn, the door shut. I thought about turning back, but something kept me moving forward. I tried the handle, locked. Just as I was about to leave, the door creaked open. A man in his 50s with thinning hair and suspicious eyes looked me up and down. "You lost, ma'am." I forced a smile. I was just looking for directions. He grunted and started to close the door, but behind him, I saw it. That same black notebook sitting on his desk. My breath caught. The door shut, and I walked quickly back to my car, my pulse racing. Whatever this woman was doing, she was working with people who didn't belong anywhere near our family. Later that night, while Emily put the baby to bed, Victoria lingered in the kitchen with me. She leaned against the counter, her lips curved in that practiced smile. "You're looking tired, Mrs. Harris. Maybe you should rest more. Let me take some of the stress off your shoulders." I forced a chuckle even as bile rose in my throat. "Oh, I've managed stress my whole life. Don't you worry about me." Her eyes flickered, sharp and calculating, before softening again. "Of course. You're very strong." It was the kind of compliment that felt like a warning. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the ticking clock. And then it came to me. If Victoria wanted to play games, I'd set a trap she'd never see coming. The next morning, I called an old friend, Martha, a retired nurse I'd known for decades. She was sharp, discreet, and most importantly, she owed me a favor. I asked her to run some tests on the tea sample I'd poured into a jar before dumping the rest. She hesitated but agreed. A few days later, Martha called me with the results. It wasn't just chamomile, dear. There were traces of sedatives in that tea. Enough to make you dizzy, maybe even pass out if you'd finished it. My hands shook as I clutched the phone. "I knew it," I whispered. That was the proof I needed. But proof alone wasn't enough. I had to figure out her endgame. Did she want my money? Emily's family's inheritance? Or was it something darker, something I couldn't even imagine yet? One evening, when Victoria excused herself to take a phone call, I crept upstairs to Emily's office. My hands trembled as I rifled through the drawers, praying I'd find nothing but bracing myself for the worst. And then I saw it, a document sitting neatly on top of a folder. A draft of a power of attorney with my name on it, and Victoria listed as the authorized agent. My blood ran cold. That was it. That was her plan. She wanted legal control, the keys to everything my husband had left me, everything I had worked for my whole life. I slipped the paper back exactly as I'd found it and tiptoed out of the room, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. That night, I stared at myself in the mirror, 58 years old, lines etched on my face from grief and laughter both. And I realized something. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about legacy. My husband's, mine, Emily's, and even the grandchildren's. I couldn't let a snake like Victoria coil around it all. The next phase of my plan began with kindness. Oh, I smiled at her more than ever, complimented her cooking, pretended to lean on her advice. I let her think I was falling right into her web. But behind the scenes, I was preparing. I copied that draft document, locked it in my safe, and called another old friend, this time a lawyer. Just be careful, he warned. People like this. They don't play fair. I know, I said quietly. That's why I have to be smarter. And so the trap began to take shape. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Because what came next was a battle of wills, one that nearly broke me, but also reminded me of a truth. Every woman should carry with her. We are stronger than the monsters who hide in plain sight. I had spent my entire life learning how to read people. As a teacher, as a mother, as a wife. Children try to hide their mistakes. Colleagues mask their envy. Neighbors bury their judgments under a smile. And over the years, I've learned one simple truth. Lies always leak. Even when the liar thinks they've built an airtight wall, the cracks show. Victoria, or whatever her real name was, had cracks. They were small, hidden behind her flawless smile and sugary tone, but they were there. The way her eyes darted when she thought no one was watching. The way she slipped up with names, once calling my son by a different one. The way she seemed too knowledgeable about Emily's finances. Too eager to know about my late husband's business dealings. So I waited. I made tea with her. I walked with her. I let her think I was warming to her, that she was winning me over. And all the while, I laid out the rope strand by strand, that she would use to hang herself. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and pulled out the draft of that power of attorney. I thought about how close I'd come to signing something similar, years ago when my husband was ill. If I had been weak then, if I had signed my rights away, she'd already own us all. That thought lit a fire in me I didn't know I still had. The next day, I slipped the copied draft into an envelope and mailed it to my lawyer with a simple note. Keep this safe. More will follow. Meanwhile, I started asking small, seemingly innocent questions. So, Victoria, do you have family nearby? Where did you say you grew up again? Every time she gave a different story. Her mother was sick in Georgia. No, wait. She'd passed years ago. She grew up in Vermont. No, she meant Virginia. Lies stacked on lies until even she couldn't keep them straight. Then came the night that changed everything. Emily had gone out to dinner with a friend, leaving me and Victoria alone with the children. After putting the little ones to bed, I came downstairs to find her at the dining table with her phone, speaking in a low, urgent voice. I froze in the hallway, listening. No, it's almost ready, she whispered. She trusts me now. The paperwork will be done soon. Stop rushing me. My blood ran cold. She wasn't just scheming. She was reporting to someone. I leaned against the wall, heart pounding, and realized I couldn't do this alone anymore. The time had come to bring someone else into the circle. The next morning, I called Mark. My son had always been pragmatic, level-headed, less swayed by charm than his sister. I invited him over under the pretense of needing help with the garden. As we worked side by side, I lowered my voice. Mark, there's something you need to know about Victoria. He frowned, pulling off his gloves. Mom, Emily swears she's the best thing that ever happened to them. What's going on? I handed him a folder where I'd stashed copies of the draft, my notes, and Martha's report on the sedatives. He flipped through them, his face paling. Are you saying she drugged you? I nodded. And she wants control of my assets and Emily's too, if she can manage it. She's not who she says she is. Mark sat back, rubbing his forehead. God, Mom. If this is true, it is, I said firmly. But if we accuse her without more, Emily will defend her. We need to catch her in the act. That's when Mark, my practical, skeptical son, leaned in and whispered, Then let's bait the hook. We hatched a plan. I would pretend to draw up new documents, a fake will, leaving Victoria in charge of a substantial sum. The kind of bait a snake couldn't resist. Mark's friend, who worked in private security, would help us record the exchange, every word, every move. The hardest part was pretending to be warm to her, to let her believe I was slipping under her spell. I smiled through gritted teeth. I let her serve me tea, though I never drank a drop without swapping cups first. I even let her confide in me little stories about her tragic past, each one more pitiful than the last, all designed to make me feel sorry for her. And then, one evening, I left the bait on the table, a folder, slightly open, just enough to show the bold letters of a fake will, with her name listed as executor. My lawyer had drawn it up with all the right language, but no signatures. It looked authentic enough to tempt the greediest heart. I watched from the hallway as she accidentally discovered it. Her eyes widened, her hand trembling as she lifted the page. She scanned it quickly, then glanced around as if to make sure no one was watching, but I was. And so was Mark's friend. Hidden with a small camera in the vent, Victoria tucked the folder back into place and went about her evening. But I could see it in her eyes, hunger. She was already imagining herself in control. That night, she slipped into my room with a soft knock. "Mrs. Harris, I just wanted to say, I've been thinking. Maybe you should let me help more with your finances. You've worked so hard all your life. You deserve rest." I smiled sweetly. "That's kind of you, Victoria. Perhaps you're right. Let's talk tomorrow." She left her smile triumphant. But what she didn't know was that tomorrow the trap would close. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Because what happened next was the night the mask finally cracked and the monster beneath revealed itself. The morning of the trap, I woke up earlier than usual. My hands trembled as I folded the blankets and smoothed the sheets. But it wasn't fear anymore. It was anticipation. For weeks I had been pretending to be weak, confused, dependent. But today, the pretending was over. Mark arrived first, carrying a bag of groceries to look casual. He kissed my cheek and whispered, "The cameras are live. Let her make the first move." I nodded, my heart racing. Victoria floated into the kitchen shortly after. Her hair perfect, her smile warm enough to melt steel. "Good morning, Mrs. Harris," she sang, as if we were in some picture-perfect home. "Morning, dear," I answered softly. I let my hands shake just enough as I poured myself a cup of tea. The act had to be flawless. As the day went on, I played my role. I sighed heavily while reading the paper, muttered about being tired, even pretended to forget where I left my glasses. All the while, I knew her sharp eyes were studying me, calculating. Finally, in the late afternoon, I sat at the dining table and slid the folder with the fake will closer to me. I accidentally left the pen beside it, then stood up slowly. "I'll just fetch my reading glasses," I murmured, and I walked away. The hidden camera caught every second. Victoria's eyes flicked to the folder. Her breath quickened. She picked it up, scanned it again, and whispered to herself, "This is it. This is finally it." Then she did exactly what we knew she would. She pulled out her phone and dialed. Yes, she hissed into the receiver. "She's ready to sign tonight. We can move the money tomorrow." I felt a shiver down my spine. Whoever was on the other end, this wasn't just her scheme. She was working with someone else, someone bigger. Mark stepped into the room then, casual, like he'd just wandered in. "Everything okay?" She startled, clutching the folder to her chest. "Oh, just sorting through some papers for your mother." Mark smiled slowly. "Funny, because Mom doesn't sign anything without me looking it over." "You knew that, didn't you?" Her eyes narrowed. "I don't know what you're implying." That's when I walked back in, my glasses perched on my nose, my voice steady and sharp. "What he's implying, Victoria, is that we know. We know about the pills. We know about the lies. And we know about this little scheme of yours." Her face drained of color. You're confused. You're sick. You don't know what you're talking about." Mark reached behind the clock on the mantel and pulled out the small recording device. He pressed play. Her voice filled the room. Yes, she's ready to sign. Tonight, we can move the money tomorrow. The mask cracked. She dropped the sweet smile, and what replaced it was something raw, venomous. Do you think anyone will believe you? A lonely old widow. A son desperate for attention. Emily trusts me more than she trusts either of you. And in that moment, Emily walked in. Her eyes darted between us, confusion on her face. What's going on? Mark didn't answer. He just pressed play again. The sound of Victoria's own words hung heavy in the room. Emily's face crumpled. You lied to me? Victoria's composure shattered. She lunged forward, grabbing my arm with a grip like iron. I deserved it. She screamed. Do you know what I've suffered? Do you know what it's like to have nothing? To watch women like you sit in comfort while I scrape and beg. I deserved it. For a second, I saw the true Victoria, bitter, desperate, consumed by envy. Not a caregiver, not a friend, but a predator who had finally revealed her fangs. Mark pulled her off me, and Emily, sobbing, dialed the police. When the officers arrived, Victoria's act returned. She wept, claimed we had framed her, begged them to see reason. But the recordings, the documents, and the testimony of Martha, who bravely came forward with her story about the sedatives, painted the truth. They let her out in handcuffs. And for the first time in months, I breathed freely. The weeks that followed were not easy. Emily blamed herself. The children asked why their nanny was gone. And I, in the quiet of my room, sat with the weight of betrayal. But here's the thing. Betrayal only breaks you if you let it. I took those long nights and turned them into lessons. I enrolled in an online finance course. Yes, at 55. I sat with younger students and learned how to guard what I'd built. I joined a support group for women who'd been scammed by trusted people. I even started volunteering, teaching older women basic skills to protect themselves from signing blind papers, from trusting too quickly, from being silenced by fear. One night, as I tucked my grandchildren into bed, my granddaughter asked, "Grandma, are monsters real?" I kissed her forehead and said, "Yes, sweetheart. Sometimes monsters wear smiles. But do you know what's stronger than a monster?" She shook her head. Wisdom. Wisdom and courage. And I believed it with every fiber of my being. So, to you watching this, if you've been hurt, if you've been betrayed, if you think it's too late to rise, hear me. It is never too late. We may be older, but we are not weak. The lessons of a lifetime are our armor. The skills we've gained, the battles we've survived, they're the tools that save us. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Because this isn't just my story. It's a reminder that we, as women, are far stronger than the monsters who try to break us. And sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't just surviving. It's thriving.